Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Daan Luiding. I'm the CTO of Meatable, a fresh new startup from Leiden, where we pursue the development and the production of cultured meat. Previously, I was in academia, where I was researcher at the University of Maastricht under the guiding wing of Professor Mark Post, the professor that made the first laboratory-grown hamburger. Unfortunately, public funding ran out and I moved to New York to join the team of New Harvest, which is an NGO that facilitates academic research and funds academic research in the area of cultured meat, or cellular agriculture as we might call it. But afterwards I couldn't stay in New York because my visa ran out and I couldn't get a green card. So when now moved back to Europe, to the Netherlands, I started this company and we raised some funding, and now we're doing the research and starting the development of making a scalable, affordable cultured meat product for everybody to eat.
I'm Karen Verzeiden. I'm a lawyer. Actually, I work with Axon, science-based lawyers. We're a small niche firm, 50 minutes biking from here. Now, actually, I took my law degree here in the University of Amsterdam. That was some time ago. We didn't have such a nice building as you have, guys, so be happy about this, because I just told Dan I had to fight in order to follow my werkcollege. Anyway, we work with a lot of innovative companies in the food space, in the medical devices space, in the pharmaceutical space, and I personally focus on food products. So we deal with questions like, how do you hit the market? What kind of rules are applicable? What kind of contracts with your commercial partners do you need? And if ever there's any litigation, we can help out as well.
So first of all, I'm Bert Eurlings. Enjoy your meal, because eating something is not only to take care of your nutritional needs, but it's also a social thing. So enjoy it. That's good for digestion. I would like to say a few things about myself. You have to click it. Yeah, I'm a farmer's son, so rather traditional. I'm not coming from Amsterdam, as you see. I'm coming from the other capital of Europe, where the euro was born, Maastricht. So this was my home house. Next one. So, and the smallest boy, that's me. So I grew up at a farm between animals, not only pigs, but also cattle and fruits. Next one, and I went to study at Utrecht University. I'm a vet. And I became a vet to work on veterinary public health, to take care of you and my health. Sometimes we see vets as somebody who's taking care of pet animals, but one of the main jobs of vets is to take care of our food. And that's also my mission in life. And I went to Wageningen University, and in the end of the day, after 17 years at academia, I joined the biggest food company of Europe, Vion Food, and I'm doing there the same thing as what I did in academia. And Vion Food is a company who has every day 100 million consumers, and also more than 10,000 every day in Amsterdam. And we have to take care that the food is safe, that we produce those products which the consumers are asking for. So that's what I'm doing every day.
So start off with lab-grown meat. Dan, what is it and why do we need it?
Lab-grown meat is meat made from muscle and fat cells from animals. So instead of raising an entire cow, sheep, pig, or any other animal that we consume, you can just take the cells that we need for the part of the animal that we consume, and you can expand those cells in a controlled environment where you're feeding it the nutrients, which it normally would take in, but only broken down into its fundamental pieces where it can be absorbed by the cells. And this way you can expand cells, because that's what apparently cells do. They divide and they grow. And this way you can create the biomass in the form of stem cells to actually produce a piece of tissue from muscle and stem cells that you can actually eat. And the reason I think this is really necessary is currently the world is consuming an increasing amount of animal protein, and the way that we're producing this animal protein is not very sustainable. We're feeding 25 kilograms per kilogram of beef. This is the feed that needs to be produced, and for that feed we need about 15,000 liters of water to produce actually a kilogram of beef, which is enormous. Also the methane production and also the pesticides, herbicides, antibiotic uses is just not a very sustainable way of making our food. With the increasing population and especially rising middle class, where they all are consuming more animal protein in their diet, there needs to become a change, and cultured meat will probably play a very important role in what we call the protein transition, coming from animal protein in more diversified portfolio, like plant-based, which are increasingly coming better, maybe insect-based, but also I think cultured meat can definitely play a big role in giving people options for alternatives which are less environmental resource harmful for the planet.
So you mentioned the environmental factors of meat. Bert, do you agree that meat presents such a big problem for climate change? And I believe you have some slides for this as well.
Yeah, I prepared some slides because a lot of people are trumpeting a lot of facts about meat without taking care of science. And you see the picture here out of Science of last year. This is a review paper of scientists out of England. And they put down, okay, what's now the real carbon footprint of meat? And what you see is that on top of it is beef that's grown only for beef, so not from herds which produce also milk. This is beef produced in North America. That has a tremendous big footprint for CO2. But luckily, we are not eating that here in Holland, and not in Europe at all. So when we look to the meat species we are eating, like pigs is the pork is the biggest protein we are consuming, and next to that comes poultry. The CO2 footprint of pork and poultry is close to tofu and grains. And you have to be aware, you can click. You have to be aware also that 1 kilo of grains is producing 0.6 kilo of poultry meat. 1 kilo grain is producing 0.6 kilo of poultry meat. So everybody is speaking about these beef products which originate from feedlots in the US, but that's not what we are eating here in Holland. And that's not what we are eating in Europe. And I agree with everybody that we have to work on our carbon footprint. And we have to improve further. And there's a lot of possibilities to improve the system further. So that's what we have to do. And that's where we are. And we are measuring now our own footprints of our farms. And you can see that on this slide. And they are all with the 10% best in the world. And that's because we are quite sufficient. And we have a lot of byproducts of the food industry. And we are not feeding our pigs and poultry grains, which we can use for human consumption. We are feeding them almost all byproducts of the food industry, which provides them with a very low carbon footprint.
Would any of you like to respond to that? Karin or Daan?
Yeah, so I totally agree that there's different measurements which you can take into account to measure your carbon footprint, and one species might definitely, for example, chicken is nearly not as harmful as beef. That's for sure. One thing that we didn't take into account, of course, is animal welfare and animal diseases. Since I think a couple months, in last year, there's been a massive outbreak of swine fever in Asia, which are potentially hundreds of, or millions of animals will probably be preemptively killed because of the spread of the disease. And I think also Belgium is now in threat of it. They're trying to control it. Apparently people are not very susceptible for animal welfare, else probably a lot more people will be vegetarian or vegan. So that's why we always propagate the climate effect of it. And just diversification is, I think, the key to this. I don't think that you should ban saying, well, we don't want to remove farmers. I'm for sure not against farmers at all. I just want to reduce the amount of animals that we have to rely on for our food consumption by diversifying. That's, I think that's the message that we're trying to get out.
Perhaps I may add to this just to get some more, well, nuance to the framework. And Bert, thank you for that. Well, both of you actually. It's good to know that actually the massive outbreak of, well, mad cow's disease, that was in the 90s. And we also had the biodiesel, where a lot of chicken were affected, was at the basis of what we call the General Food Safety Law. So based on that, that is since 2002, we have a very solid framework within Europe that assures food safety. And that also takes into account animal welfare. It doesn't take away that you can have different views whether or not you think actually eating animal proteins, well, is fair or not. But at least we have a very thorough framework for safety in Europe.
Okay. So we want to move on to the next part of the BètaBreak, and we will discuss more about the production of the meat and the disadvantage and advantages. So our first question was, how is the first lab-grown meat burger produced, and what is the difference now?
So the first hamburger was more of a proof of concept. It wasn't like a real product, and what you can see from that, it was priced at nearly 250,000 euros. So that's quite expensive for a single hamburger, and it was mostly done to demonstrate that there is technology that can actually facilitate this, that this is possible. So it was done using muscle stem cells, which are not very optimal for growing these in large scales. There's also been use of animal-derived products to make the cells, to stimulate the cells for growth. And only very suboptimal sizes were created, so you needed 10,000 of very small muscle strand packed together to make this single hamburger. But it's basically saying, well, we built the first computer, which was as big as a single room, couldn't do much calculation as it is, and then saying, well, when is the Tesla coming out, or when is your smartphone coming out? Yeah, it takes time, it takes innovation, and that's what we're working on right now. So we're approaching it from multiple sides, looking at different cells that we can use. So stem cells comes in a variety of sorts, and also with different stemness to it. So we're investigating which type of stem cell is most suitable for this. How can we produce either or both muscle and fat together so that we can have the real experience? How can we create thick tissues? So those are just a handful of things that we're looking into, and of course making the entire production method completely animal-free, completely scalable. I think the picture that you show on the video right now is what we believe is our future take on how this would look like inside of a factory. And there are so many added benefits if you can do it like this, right? Because it's a complete sterile environment, so there's no chance, or at least very little chance of contamination. And since we're using cells, we can take samples much faster and much easier in the entire production line. And you can do this inside of a city, right? You can do this inside of a building instead of having farmland where your cows need to, like pastures where your cows need to graze on, and then your food needs to be transported from outside of a city, inside of a city. You can actually make a city self-sustainable by producing the food from inside of the city, so locally grown meat, as per se.
Your competitors, Mosa Meats, also produces lab-grown meat, but they still use fetal calf serum, which is blood taken from the fetuses of baby cows. So what do you have to say about that? Do you
so
still use that?
Nobody produces anything at the moment. There's no cultured meat which you can buy, so everybody is still in an R&D phase. And I actually don't know what's going on at Mosa Meat, since, competitor, you can only compete on a product, right? Saying, I'm cheaper, better tasting, whatever, since there's no product. I don't feel there's competition. We're both trying to achieve the same goal, and we have different methodologies for it. On the point of fetal bovine serum from FCS, it's clear that any player in this field is steering away from that as fast as possible. It's unimaginable that this product will be used to produce cultured meat in the future, because then you will just be killing animals with a lot of difficult steps in between, which doesn't make any sense at all. The way that it's being harvested is horrible. It's kind of atrocious, making a cow pregnant and then killing its fetus after 3 months old and then extracting the blood. It's not very pretty. And so far we have been using a cell type that is completely independent of fetal bovine serum, and a lot of other players in the world have been looking at maybe plant-based alternatives or steering away from a cell type that doesn't require it as much. So people are definitely working on it, and it's unimaginable that this product will end up in the entire production line in the future.
And this first burger was made with this serum, with this.
Yeah, so the cells that we use for that did require a portion of serum to stimulate the growth of it. Yeah.
And you still need medium, I believe. So you over the phone we talked about Dayman medium. I have used that in my lab when I was in the lab, and I believe it's still quite expensive. So is that a trouble for your to cut down costs?
No, it's actually quite a nice starting point to come from DMAM, because we know exactly the concentrations of nutrients which are inside of the medium, and it's mostly water. So if you're gonna buy this in bulk, and it's going to be different from pharmaceutical grade, and also, like you mentioned, the DMAM has phenyl red in it, which we don't require. There's certain buffers in it that we don't require. So if you're looking at the raw ingredients which are in DMAM, it's almost a couple of pennies per kilos. It's the dry matter from amino acids or salts which are inside of it is negligible. So mostly the cost of the growth medium comes from the growth factors that you require to stimulate your cells to start proliferating. So it is actually a pretty good starting point if you know exactly what's in there, how much is in there, and you can analyze what your cells use over time, and we'll be creating a custom-made medium over time that really facilitates the requirements of our cells.
And Karin, about the regulation, are there already regulations for labgrown meat in the Netherlands?
Yes, there are. And again, this has been dealt with in a European framework. And the framework is called novel foods. Actually, we have this in place since '97, but as of January last year, we have a new version of the novel food regulation, and it applies to, well, new foods that were not that didn't take part of the regular diet within Europe prior to '97. They took that cutoff date because that was the entry into force of that regulation, and it covers foods as wide as foods derived from fungi, foods derived from or being produced using a new production method, of which we do not yet know the effects on the nutritional properties or the level of undesired substances. It deliberately includes foods based on insects, and it also includes, products like cultured meat. And in order to hit the market, you have to file a dossier in which you basically demonstrate the safety of the product. So you can imagine that you have to do a number of tests, for instance, on toxicity, but also demonstrating the nutritional profile. If your product compares to another product already present in the market, like I would call it traditional meat, you should be able to make the comparison between the two. And in the end, it is the European Commission who will grant the authorization. And they have an advisory body, which is the European Food Safety Authority, that normally, and we expect it will be the case for cultured meat, who's asked for an opinion. And those are all scientists that evaluate the safety of the product based on that dossier. And if you have the stamp of EFSA, so to speak, normally you also get the green light from the European Commission. It's put on the union list, and then you can market it. And it's worthwhile to mention that, it's actually a blessing that within Europe we already have this framework in place, whereas in other parts of the world, Singapore, they have no regulations at all, which some parties see as a great chance. But in the end, you want consumer safety, right? And in the US, they are still putting the framework in place. So companies who are perhaps a little bit ahead of the companies here in Europe, they do want to have market access, but they do not know yet how. In Europe, we know how, we know what to do. Of course, there will be practical questions and scientific questions because this is a new product, but the way forward is more or less clear.
Thanks. So Bert, can you tell me about all the regulations in place in traditional meat production? I believe you are quite passionate about how extensive they are.
Yeah, that's very extensive. The first things which count are, of course, food safety. And there are a lot of rules which are related to food safety. We have to see also that meat is a traditional product. And there are a lot of traditions already all over the globe. which you have to follow also. So there are local products. And next to that, it's animal welfare and animal health, which are very relevant. When you compare to lab-grown meat, when you compare these two things, it's above the hygiene aspects also of producing lab-grown meat and the hygiene aspects in our production sites, which are the main issues you have to tackle. And that's comparable for both. So that's where we are. And my opinion is also, just like Karen says, you better have a stringent legislation than having no legislation, because then you don't know what's happening on the market. And then you lose trust of the consumer. It's very important that you have a high level of trust of the consumer, and that's where the politicians have to take care of with high quality legislation. And that's what's happening in Europe and the US.
I was also wondering, over the phone you mentioned that at your slaughterhouse in Bokstel, there are over 30 inspectors present daily. And I was wondering, who pays for that? Is that the Vion Food Group, or is that the government?
No, we are paying the government.
You are paying the government?
Yeah, with respect to the supervision on food safety, animal products like meat, milk, eggs, they have to pay for the whole supervision. And that's opposite to all the other products. When you have Unilever or Nestlé, there the supervision is paid by the government. But for all the animal products, there's within the European legislation, they made the difference and said, okay, you have to pay for your supervision.
So would you say it's a good business strategy to, well, I assume there will be less inspection in more controlled lab-grown meat. Would it be
yes.
Would be a good business strategy to,
we have to see, but it's all about trust. So you have to have trust of the consumers that they feel that the product is safe.
I think we have a question from the audience. Yes.
Hello. Yes, the microphone works. I was wondering, you mentioned, I don't know your name, I'm sorry, but you mentioned that there is high quality legislation pertaining to meat production in Europe. However, the Dutch government is not abiding by those rules and is enabling having mega stalls of pigs and stuff, and ignoring regulations about ammonia and stuff. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think there are regulations, also environmental regulations within Europe. There is a discussion about the interpretation of legislation every time, all about Europe. And the European system of legislation is that the European Commission decides about the letter of the legislation, what's in the legislation. It's to the member state to do the interpretation of the legislation, and sometimes the European Union will interfere with the food authority out of which is based in Grange in Ireland. When they say, okay, member state, you are not interpreting it in a proper way, then the Commission can interfere. And next to that, the inspectors, they have their own interpretation, and they have their own decide what's correct or not. So that's how the legislation is built on. And that's the same in the US, and that's also the same now in China.
Could it be that I'm still referring to your question, could it be that we are talking about two different matters? Basically, it's about legislation and enforcement, Bert refers to, whereas I understand that you might hint at animal welfare.
Not only animal welfare, but also human welfare, because ammonia regulations are currently being overstepped. I don't know how to say this. There was this Follow the Money article that came out like a couple of days ago that mentioned 5 different things in which way the Dutch government is enabling how do you say this? Is enabling to don't follow the regulations of the EU. And I was wondering, like, how do you think that we have to go forward, because a lot of permits and stuff are on the line.
Well, I see two tendencies here, and I think that, well, those types of issues, follow the money is well, particular journalism as well, if I may. But I think this will pave the way for cultured meat. Do we still want these tables? Do we still want these places where, a lot of substances are used that might be harmful for the environment as well?
Yeah, sure. We have time for one more question.
You mentioned earlier that the meat has to go through the novel food legislation Europe-wise. How far is that in that process to go through it? How far are you along in that process?
To whom is the question?
Pak maar op, Daan, als je wilt.
So to enter the novel food regulations, you need to go through multiple toxicology tests, allergy tests, and you need a certain amount to supply product to those tests. And that's roughly, I think, 25 kilos, last time I recall. And to culture that amount, we're not nearly there yet. We're still in the phase where we're only growing small pieces of tissue, and we're using that mostly for internal validation, internal testing. So that will probably be another year and a half out before we're starting that process.
Before you start getting into the novel
Yes,
food,
and novel food procedure usually takes about 9 to 1.5 years. But during that time, we're looking into ways to save
9 months, that is.
9 months. 9 and 1.5. Well, 9 months to 1.5 years, depending on the quality of the product that you deliver. And we want to make sure beforehand that we have internally confirmed that it is exactly in the quality ranges of meat. Also, we're looking together with government to see if we can have a controlled environment where we have the first initial test showing that it's safe to have sensory panels, because it would be kind of interesting if you would go through the entire novel food procedure without ever tasting it, and then at the end of when you have approval, putting it in your mouth and it doesn't taste very pleasant, right? So that would be kind of counterproductive. So we're looking into ways to already have people try the product in sensory panels or any other close environment where people know what they're getting into, so that we make sure everybody is safe, and then already starting the novel food procedure at the same time.
And as that has to be voted on by all the states in the European Union, would you not be afraid that during that process there would be people involved saying that's going to be bad for our food industry, that's going to be bad for our meat industry, and then simply be vetoed, end of story?
I think this is one referred to you.
Yeah, actually, the procedure is centralized in the sense that the Commission, the European Commission, will have the final say. But you're correct to note that, well, member states are implied via the so-called PAF committee, Plant Animal Food and Feed Safety. So within the procedures, the member states can have their say, and it is a scientific conversation in the first place, though. So if on the basis of your file you can demonstrate that your product is safe, that it has the same nutritional profile as the traditional meat, I would say the chances are low that based on safety measures they would send it away. However, and Dan, you may wish to comment on this, it will be good to, well, inform people about this product, to take them along, because you cannot just launch an entirely new product and expect that everyone will embrace it.
No, I completely agree, and that's why we're here, right? That's why I'm here, to let you know that we're doing this, what we're doing, how the process will look like, so that people, you don't need to startle legislators, especially legislators, don't startle them with any new products. You need to massage it, you need to tell them what's coming, you need to tell them what the benefits are, what the negatives are, really take them along. As soon as you have them, that they already know that you're coming. So this is a process of education, process of patience, process of just sharing what you're doing.
We will get into that in a moment, in the public acceptance. So Dan, I first want to ask you more about the efficiency of lab-grown meat and its production. Is there something you can say compared to regular meat? But of course, there's a large difference between dairy meats and just meats produced just for meat. So can you say how much more efficient it is?
The bottom line is we can't. Nobody has ever done this at scale, so nobody has actually done the input-output really with measurements on the large scale and say, well, these are the numbers. It is just done by approximation. So there are 2 studies done to collaboration with King's College that show a massive reduction, but this is all based on assumptions from similar processes, but only made based on algae. So it's very hard to make that claims, even though it's very easy to imagine that if you're converting all your nutrients into cells and not a living creature, no products that you're not using, that you should be more efficient, especially when the methane production is a big factor, I think, in the entire chain of greenhouse gas production and normal animal raising. And of course, with cells, you don't have any methane production because the methane production comes from gut bacteria that ferment the grass, the plant material that they're eating, and that the byproduct of is methane. For the rest, it's just approximation and a little bit of speculation to see, well, this should be more efficient, but no hard numbers to be actually put forward.
And Bert, do you see advantages in regular meats when it comes to sustainability? Are there, in what way could it be more sustainable to keep it going?
Yeah, I think, first of all, let me say I welcome all innovations on the market. I have been speaking with the first man who worked on lab-grown meat, Willem van Ede, already in 1999, to speak about his invention of lab-grown meat. And we also, as a company, we welcome all new innovations because that can help our food system. What we see is that, as Dan said, also it's a lot about methane production. So we are now working on producing poultry and pork without any methane production, and also eggs. There's no methane production anymore in these systems. And then we have only within beef and within purebred beefs some challenges to go. So what I see is that we are living more or less in a food democracy, where we have all the different choices for everybody available, and a democracy means also that we respect each other's choices. And for us, with more than 100 million consumers every day, it's a matter of when it's taken up by the market, then we are going to produce it. The same as we do within the Netherlands. We are producing now products with a higher level of animal welfare, both in poultry and pork. And it's a consumer, in the end of the day, he decides. The steps of the consumers decide what they are going to buy. And that helps us to force the whole supply chain into novel ways of production.
Yes. Okay, thanks. So now we want to get into the public acceptance of lab-grown meats, and I think one really important part of that is the taste of lab-grown meats. Yeah, no, it's not. It definitely isn't.
This is an artist's interpretation of future products that we made. So a friend of my co-founder, also the previous one, he made impressions of what future products could behold. So this is not real. This is not a photo. So we thought of, well, if you have more control of the cells which you grow, you can provide them with a different amino acid profile, which can steer the nutrient value of your meat in the end, getting more protein or less unsaturated fats, or maybe fat at all. So you can really optimize and personalize meat for everybody's preference, which is really interesting. That's why we came up with the Nutrient Tweaker 4000.
Yeah, but that's funny. That's when you need such a thick piece of meat, then you need blood vessels. But okay. The point is, and where I'm every time think, what are we doing? Our consumption pattern in all the red meats, so beef and pork, is that more than 80% of the beef that we consume is processed, either burgers or other processed products. So I see much more future for lab-grown products in these processed products than in a traditional piece of meat.
The in vitro hamburger, you mean?
Yeah, but this is just, of course, a artist's interpretation, right? This is not real. It's a 3D render.
the consumer is not going to buy this piece of meat with so much fat.
No, but they can because it's not real.
But but do you think we can make also other things than only burgers? Is there also a challenge of
Yeah, for sure.
making
So
like this, or
yeah.
maybe chicken or fish?
any species that has muscle tissue can be produced this way. And come back to the point of necessity of blood vessels, that's not really the case. There are, not necessarily. It depends on how much you want to approximate real meat with all the cell types that are in there. And you could easily, because endothelial cells, so the blood vessel types, are only less than 1% of your total cell amount in your meat. So you can very easily circumvent that by having microfluidic channels through your you can when you're differentiating your cells, making them into muscle and fat cells with a supporting structure, you can make sure that the supporting structure is perfusible enough to allow the nutrients and oxygen through your cells to reach your cells during their maturation phase.
But of course, or maybe this is a question. Do your muscle cells exercise? Because of course.
Yeah. So we're now working on a project that has what we call a tissue chamber. So what we do, what you saw in the previous picture with the factory, is that we first keep the cells in a stem cell state to make use of their capacity for start proliferating, so start to growth, because that's what stem cells usually do. They're like a blank slate without a function, but they are capable of mass expansion, and that's the characteristics that we want to use. And then afterwards, in a controlled environment, turn them into either muscle or fat cells. Sorry, the mic's... So that's basically what you're doing, and yeah, it's...
Very interesting. So, Bert, do you think it will be able to resemble real meat anytime soon? Do you buy that?
Yeah, let me be clear. The first question is, should it resemble real meat? Why not putting it on the market as a new food item and see which value it will have in the food system? I think that when I look, and I'm looking already for years to this product, as a product which can be used next to meat, or also in some meat products where we are producing now also a lot of hybrid products. We have hamburgers with 50% other products in it of vegetable origin. So I see there in the first steps next faster a future than just saying we have now lab-grown meat.
Okay.
I think you should comment, Dan. That would be interesting.
So what exactly?
Is it supposed to be meat?
Well, no, I think it should be a class on its own, because it's what we would say a better product, because there's no animal killed for it. So why would we be in the same shelf as the other meat? So I think it definitely should be a product on its own to also show the different ways of producing. And also maybe the benefits that it could have over the other products. So that's why I think it definitely should have a product on its own. And of course also to inform the public about it, right? You must be transparent of what it is. You cannot say, well, this is regular meat. Well, the production method is totally different. So there should be an indication on it that it comes from a different production method, that's for sure.
Yeah, that was what we want to ask for Karin as well. Can it be called meat, and with in mind the whole discussion about this vegetarian vegetarische slager a couple of years ago?
Yeah, very pertinent question in this debate, and it's not a done deal yet. On the one hand, I think you have a stream that really would like to call it meat. On the other side, and I hear, Dan, you're part of that school, it could perhaps be called otherwise as well. You can have various approaches. I, of course, take the legal approach, and then you can see that if you look at the regulations, if you see what the definition of meat looks like, it actually refers to slaughter. And if there's one thing that does not apply for cultured meat, of course, it's slaughter. And actually, you should either use the legal name if that's existing for a product. Well, it definitely isn't because it's new. Or the customary name, it doesn't exist because it's new. Or a description that accurately informs the public. So the debate should be around, if you use a descriptive name for cultured meat, is it possible to make a reference to meat after all or not? And actually, we try to have a discussion with the enforcement authorities. In the Netherlands, that's the Dutch Food Safety Authority, who also need to be educated in order to see what would be a good name to, on the one hand, inform the public what it's really about, and on the other hand, well, position the companies in these fields to really say what they are doing. So it's not a done deal yet.
No, I can understand it. I can also understand that maybe lab-grown meat doesn't sound really tasteful or something. I don't know. It also has to be a name that sells, of course.
Perhaps we could do a little test here.
Yeah. So, if you have a...
Who likes the name of lab-grown meat? Can I see hands? Okay, let's throw in an alternative
so
then.
the other one that is currently being prompted from the US is cell-based meat. So you have plant-based, normal meat, and cell-based meat. So anybody
Who likes that one?
All right, that's a little better. And of course, the one I like to use, because I sort of grew up with the term, is cultured meat. It resonates with me much, but not to bias you in any sense. Who likes the term cultured? All right, okay, there we go.
And any alternatives from your side, please shout.
Please, yeah. There might be a prize involved.
Okay.
If it's good enough.
Artificial meat.
I think it's worse.
Who likes it? Who likes artificial meat?
You're all by yourself. Okay. Another suggestion over there?
In vitro meat.
Yeah, that's already circulating.
Yeah, who likes that? In vitro meat.
I think I will like it. Yeah.
You like that?
Yeah, I think I will like it. It sounds sophisticated.
Very technical. And what I've noticed that we have been debating this with other people on the team so much. The Dutch version is even worse. Kweekvlees is not very appealing. But it's very hard because every like you see, there's a lot of other people that have different preferences. So it's going to be very hard to find a term that everybody feels comfortable with. So this is an ongoing conversation. And so far for the legislation, I don't even know actually what they're going to push for. This is also a debate among other companies, what we all feel comfortable with. So this is just an ongoing conversation.
Okay, thanks. So we've already gotten a bit into the future when we talk about names. But of course, we still need to get there. And I want to ask you, Dan, because we're at the Science Park, and maybe you can inspire some students to indicate what kind of disciplines you need to further develop this lab-grown meat.
So that is where I truly enjoy the position that I am in right now. From the background, I'm a cell molecular biologist. But right now, I can see all the different fields which are required to make this happen. It's super multidisciplinary. There's material science, there's engineering, there's scaffold production, there's even still cell biology, chemical engineering, scaling, whatever you can imagine. This is things we need, but usually based in the exact sciences. But also on the other side, regulatory should be done, nutrient analysis. You can just imagine almost nearly anything that you can imagine of a background in academia is applicable for us and is useful for us now or in the future, for sure. But right now, if you're a cell biologist and you're looking for an internship, you should check
Here it is.
Yeah, right. You can always find us at meetable.com, and also on LinkedIn. You can find me if you're interested in working in this field, and we'd love to talk to you.
So, Karin, do you think lab-grown meat will be successful?
I, of course, do believe in this invention. We work with a lot of innovative companies, and what we see is that there need to be alternatives in future. I believe that not the entire world will switch to cultured meat. I believe as well that not the entire world will be a vegetarian. So it will be one of the important options for the future. That's the way I see it.
Okay, so Bert, assuming that lab-grown meat will take off, how will the traditional meat industry respond?
Yeah, I first of all want to answer the same question you put forward to Dan. There are a lot of young academics working in our company, and the good thing they can do there, they have, from the first day they are working, more than 100 million consumers every day behind them, forcing them to innovate our food system. And we have a lot of young academia working for us, doing internships, and whatever they want to do, we have there are a lot of positions for them. So the question, how do I see lab-grown meat in the future? I think it can be a part of our food system. The discussion about the price will be a big thing. So when we look to the price of our food now and what consumers are willing to pay for it, and then they look every time. So we as consumers are paying less and less and less for food. And that's what's happening in our society, but also around us, which makes it sometimes difficult for us to sustain. That's also the reason why we put on the shelves products which are a little bit more expensive and giving the consumer also the choice. And when we do that together with the retailers, that works. So I see certainly a role for alternative proteins. I would call it also high health protein instead of something with cultures or biotech name in it, because consumers are afraid of that. But consumers know that they need high quality proteins. And in the near future, our population, our society has a higher need for high quality protein. We are becoming older, you can see it on me. But that means also older people need more and high quality protein. We can do with less, like we are sitting here. But your parents and your grandparents, that's a different piece of cake. So there is certainly a need, and I think we have to get that into our food system.
If I may add to that, actually it's for your perspective, it's good to know that a lot of traditional meat producers are investing in ventures like the one that Dan represents. For instance, in the US, there's a venture called Memphis Meat, and they received an important investment from Tyson Foods, who is a traditional meat producer. So actually these two worlds, they're growing closer.
Okay, I think we go to the last question. And this is actually a question we want to ask to you all, so feel free to respond. Where are we in 5 years? Dan.
So our expectations is that we will be we'll be at the end of the cycle of our pilot plant facilities, and that we are scaling up towards what we call a flagship plant, so really high volume, high production amounts of meat, and that will, before that's operational and is producing, will be another 3 years. So 5 years will be at the end of developing in our pilot plant scales, moving towards a flagship plant for commercial productions at par on cost with regular meat.
I hope so, I think. Yeah, and Karen, what do you think?
I see a big surge in what I call alternative proteins. So recently the Dutch Health Council promoted the intake of alternative protein, and then they referred to plant-based protein. In the same time, you see that not only in the area of meat, but also in the area of fish. There's also a venture active in the field of cultured fish. They're taking the ground. So I think there's enough place for all these different ventures, catering many different appetites.
Okay.
Yes, where are we in 5 years? I don't know. It's a nice surprise. What I see, what will be sure, I think algae and insects will be in our food system within 5 years. And that also to a large extent into our feed systems. That's at least within 5 years something which is going to be changed. Let's see how fast also the regulators go ahead with lab-grown meat. Because that's a big thing. When I want to change a little bit in my production system, then there are officially seen there are time schedules where the government has to obey. But when I had the possibility to send the government the file when they don't obey their own rules, then I would be super rich. So good luck. I'm fighting that also, and hope you will fight that also in a proper way.
Okay, thank you all. We have 10 minutes left for questions from the audience. I believe we have already one standing. You can ask your question.
To what degree do you think animals are necessary in the meat, in cultured meat production, and to what degree will they be necessary in the future?
None at all. So for cultured meat production, the goal, of course, is to rely 0% on other animals. That's why we're using cells from a very early stem cell state that it can be propagated forever. And of course, the entire process should be animal-free, because without it, it wouldn't make any sense, I think. It really is the promise of cultured meat that you really can produce meat without harming any animal in the entire process. And that's basically what we're striving for in every aspect of innovation. If it doesn't answer the question, can it be done without an animal? We need to do something different about it.
Before the next question, it's getting a bit crowdy because the new regulations are starting. So speak close to the microphone, please, so everyone can hear.
So there are no cells necessary to be taken
Yeah.
from the animals at an early stage?
Not perpetually, just once. So the question was, do they need to be cells taken every time from an animal? And this was the case during the first laboratory-grown hamburger, where the muscle satellite cells, they have a finite lifespan. So every time they run out of steam, because a thing called the Hayflick limit, which are a telomere degradation over time, they become senescent, and that's why you have to go back every time. But if you're taking a more early stage stem cell, your telomerases keep your telomeres long enough to propagate the cells indefinitely. That's the idea.
Hi, so I had a question about religion, because there's multiple religions.
Sorry, can you?
I had a religious question, because there's multiple religions that prohibit you to eat certain meat if it's slaughtered in a way, but if it's not slaughtered, do you think that certain religions will be able to eat the meat that they couldn't before?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, and I think I'm the last person to answer this, because I'm not a imam or rabbi. You know, it sounds like a bad joke saying, yeah, well, an imam, a rabbi, and a priest came into a restaurant and ordered cultured meat. You know, I have no idea. There has been indication. There's a paper out from a Muslim scholar that says, as long as you don't use fetal bovine serum for the process, that it should be halal. For the Jewish community, we haven't heard much about it. The problem is there's no centralized organization that just gives the stamp of approval, right? I think it shows that a little bit. It's hard to do, because a couple of thousand years ago they probably didn't thought about, like, hey, so how is cultured meat going to be in our food system? Is it kosher or halal, or is it haram? I didn't think they thought that really through. So that's a new challenge that they have to come up with in this era. Thanks.
Hi. So I arrived a little bit late, so forgive me if this question is a little bit redundant. I was especially interested in the nutritional discussion between you two guys. Since cloned meat is dependent on an animal and that cell needs to be cloned, isn't it still possible that you still need a lot of different animals to clone just for the sake of variety?
Sorry, what, to clone beef?
Well, if you would clone one single cow and make 100 million hamburgers from that, you don't want to eat.
What do you mean clone? I don't think you're using the right terminology here. Okay. Cloning is the using of the DNA and putting it in a oocyte to make a different, as the same animal with the same DNA, right? So that's not what we're doing. We're not making an animal. We're just taking the cells and expanding those. So it's a very different process.
So are you planning on using the same animal to culture the meat every single time? Because I can imagine that would cause a problem maybe in nutritional value. Because you don't want to use the same animal every single time you want to produce a new batch of meat.
I think you're a bit confused of the process, because once we take a cell, it doesn't. What we feed the cell will end up being its nutritional value. So we're not cloning any cell, and the cell propagates itself, and it doesn't degrade over time. That's the nice thing of using a stem cell, and it's not like a copy machine that you fade over time if you maintain the cell with a high quality QC. So it's a very different process, and we're not using the cow all over again. We're taking the cells from it once, and then we are banking those cells, and that's the cells which we're using. But we're also looking into different species, different breeds, to have a variety of choice of different types of animals that we can pick from. But there's no cloning involved, and the cells don't run out, and that's I think the crucial step for this.
Thanks. Now it's time for our next question.
My question is for Bert. I'm wondering, so suppose hypothetically that Dan's wildest dreams come true and lab-grown meat becomes cheap and healthy and tasty and all the fun stuff. Would you support a slow dismantling of the traditional meat industry?
When all these discussions are fulfilled, they get the power on the market. And then, so when all these conditions are fulfilled, what you're saying, they will get the market, the power on the market, and that would affect the meat industry. Yeah.
Okay. One more question.
Hi, thank you for the discussion so far, really interesting. I'm wondering, because I think Karin said that some traditional meat companies are actually supporting this process, which is great, I think. But I'm also wondering, there must be companies that are they don't agree with this, the whole presence of, or the whole production of lab-grown meat. And I was wondering to what extent there has been lobbying by companies that want to prevent the introduction of lab-grown meat, for example, in European spheres or on national level, and how that has been, if it has been hindering the process so far.
We haven't seen that so far yet in the EU. However, there's this famous cattlemen's petition in the US, you know, the cowboys with their big boots and the traditional meat producers who did not want to apply the name of meat to a product that has been produced differently. The main reason of their complaint is that, well, slaughtered meat is subject to certain hygiene regulations, and you have to accept that government officials enter your building and actually check your product, whereas this will be completely different for cultured meat. Of course, the process have to be safe as well. This needs to be checked. However, their concern was that perhaps the clean meat companies would have less of a burden and yet benefit from the meat reputation. So they have been presenting a bill to the White House. So far that has not been taken into account, but the good thing is that actually there's two authorities there, the FDA and the USDA, and they decided to work together to share actually the market access supervision and the checks once the product will hit the market.
Okay, so it's time to finish up. First, I would like to say that we have, of course, an edition next month. It's about the blockchain and whether that is bullshit. There should be a question mark behind it. We are not so stellig. Anyway, we are also always looking for new members for our committee who can help us produce these discussions. So if you think that would be fun, please send us an email at redactie@betaBreak.nl. And yeah, thanks. And also I would like a loud applause for our speakers here